Broadcast. Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network, a division of the Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network. The following program broadcast is an original creation by the broadcast entity. Discussion within the following broadcast should be used for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice or consultation. Before considering application of any broadcast content in the following program, please consult your healthcare provider. If you feel you are having a medical emergency, please contact your local health services for immediate assistance. MS&Me Media and the Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network do not guarantee or warrant the accuracy of information in the broadcast to follow. The Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network provisions broadcast services to program hosts. Information discussed in the broadcast does not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or goals of the network and are solely those of the show broadcast host. Should you wish to host a broadcast, please visit our website at msmemedia.com and submit a request to become a program host. We thank you for listening to the MS&Me Radio Network. Enjoy the show. Welcome to MS&Me Interviews. I am your host, Erica Lyons Richardson. Our guest today is author and blogger Yvonne deSousa. She uses humor as a coping mechanism against the challenges of living with multiple sclerosis. Welcome to our show, Yvonne.
Thank you, Erica. So excited to be interviewed by you guys and to be on your show.
Oh, yeah, I was really looking forward to speaking with you today because I followed you and your blog and I just love your humor. And I'm just really excited for you to share that with the listeners. Now, Yvonne, can you share with us your MS diagnosis story?
Sure. So, when I was like 38, 39, I started having these things that would come up. The fatigue was awful. I'd have to pee a million times at night. My brain would sometimes not process things. And, I'd get together with my girlfriends, and we would talk about, it's aging. All this stuff happens with aging. So I kind of dismiss it as that. The cognitive stuff was very concerning because Alzheimer's runs in my family.
Yes.
So it was easier just to have a glass of wine with my friends and forget about it. And then the fall that I turned 40, I started having numbness and tingling in my feet. Yeah. And what was interesting was I'd gone with my family on a trip to a local casino to see a Christmas show. It was like November time. And my family, they were not much gamblers, and not that I am, but I would run around. I was running around the casino to meet them for the show and then to meet them for lunch and stuff. And I was dressed up kind of nicely.
Yes.
So when this happened, it was right after that, and it occurred to me, this must be what happens when you exercise, and I'm wearing good shoes, so that's what this must be, because I wasn't a big exercise person. And then that week, that tingling and numbness moved up my legs very quickly, from my feet to my calves to my abdomen. And that was when I was like, wow, I've got to get this checked out. So I went to my primary, who sent me to a doctor for an EMG test, which is basically when they electrocute your muscles to see what happens. And while it didn't hurt, it was intimidating because the doctor happened to be really cute, and you have to, take your pants off and nothing in your underwear from the waist down and this paper thing, and that just was very intimidating. But it didn't show what, my muscles did what they were supposed to do, I guess. So I said to this doctor, I was like, it feels like I'm walking in sand, and on a beach, and I come from the Cape, so that's a good feeling for me.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, my muscles didn't show what they're supposed to, so we're good. I like the sensation of walking on the beach. And he's like,
It's not a good thing.
So I wound up, late December, getting a whole series of MRIs. And the very next day, it was December 17th, I'm at work, and my primary doctor calls and tells me the diagnosis over the phone. And I guess she didn't have a lot of experience with it because before she had called me, she had contacted a neurologist in Boston, which is, a city about 2 hours from where I live. And I live in kind of a suburban area, kind of rural area. So when she called me, she said, I hate to tell you this, I'm sorry to tell you this at work, but we have a diagnosis, multiple sclerosis, and I need you to get to a hospital in Boston this afternoon. There's a neurologist waiting for you, and be prepared to spend the night. And it was December 17th. And I hung up, and I had two thoughts. I can't be diagnosed with MS right now. Christmas is next week, And how the heck am I going to get myself to Boston after this news? I can't drive in Boston on a good day.
Right.
So I called my little brother, who was going to a college in between where I lived and Boston, and I reached him, and he was able to meet me. He was taking his finals, and he just finished, so he was able to meet me and drive me to the hospital. And he really became my savior that day. And what was interesting was he was 21 and a semi-pro dirt bike rider who drove a huge pickup truck with 2 dirt bikes in the bed of the truck always. So I meet him at the hospital, and, this doctor's waiting for us, and he's a speed demon. He gets us to the hospital in record time. I get the diagnosis, pretty big news. And I'm saying a lot. I have to stop that. But I get the diagnosis, and I didn't have to spend the night at the hospital, so I was thrilled with that.
Yeah.
I'm still thinking, okay, Christmas is next week. I don't have to stay in the hospital, so I can finish my Christmas shopping and the baking and all this. I'm walking to my car, and my little brother says to me, you can totally get one of those handicap parking placards now.
Oh,
and I was just like, Christopher, are you kidding me? I just got this huge, horrible news. Parking is the last thing on my mind. Don't bother me with this foolishness. And he said, really, if you don't want to use it right away, you can let me borrow it.
Oh, no.
And I pictured that truck with the dirt bikes in the bed backing into a handicap spot, and I just doubled over with laughter.
You have to. I mean, you just have to.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
And I felt so much better. I mean, I was still overwhelmed. I was still frightened. I was still all these things, but I felt a little bit better.
Yeah.
And then, I get home after that long day, and I go to the mail, and again, it's Christmas time. I have one piece of mail. It's not Christmas cards. It's not bills from Christmas presents. It's a solicitation from the National MS Society.
Wow.
And the irony of that just made me laugh again.
Yeah.
So the next day, I have to go to a local hospital to start the solrimedrol infusions. And my father's a police officer in the area where we live, but he always tells us, don't speed in Eastham. In Eastham, I can't help you if you get a ticket. Those police officers are serious. Whatever you do, don't speed in Eastham. Well, sure enough, I'm stressed, so I'm speeding in Eastham. And actually, I was more than speeding. I actually passed a cruiser on the right.
Oh, no.
Yeah, which you're not supposed to do at all.
Oh.
So I get pulled over by the meanest, scariest-looking police officer you can ever imagine. And he very strictly gets out of his car, and he's very formal, and he says, where are you going in such a hurry? And I just didn't have the wherewithal to lie. So I just said, okay, officer, here's the scoop. I was just diagnosed with MS yesterday, and Christmas is next week, and I'm totally overwhelmed. I'm on my way to my first infusion. I don't know what to expect. And, of course, I'm running late because I'm just scattered, and I know that's not an excuse, but there you go.
You just unload on the police officer.
I wanted to get out of the car and give him a hug.
Aww.
He had never gotten an excuse like that before, and was just so floored by what I had to say. And it was all I could do not to crack up because he just looked so awful for me.
Yeah.
So we got past that, and turns out he knew someone who knew someone who knew someone who had multiple sclerosis.
Oh,
so he gave me some tips that he learned. And I didn't get a ticket. But all those things, they just really helped get rid of the stress. And I was like, wow, this is like a really interesting release.
Coping skill, yeah.
So,
It's like such human moments.
And humor kept going on.
Yeah, such human moments in such time of just crisis in your brain, trying to process what you're learning and what you're hearing, but yet all these just human moments keep happening. And you realize, that you're grounded in that. That really is. That's true. That's a great, coping skill. Now, your sister Lori has multiple sclerosis as well. So how did your family react to the news when you were told you had MS?
Well, so I have a very interesting family tree. So, I don't need to go into too much of this, but it's kind of funny. When people ask where I am in the birth order, I say I don't know, and they don't understand how I can say that. And I say, well, depending on how you look at it, I'm either the oldest, the youngest, or the middle child. And sometimes my mom's not even sure her marriage to my dad was legal, so I could also be considered an illegitimate. So my sister that has MS is my oldest sister, and we have the same mom. This little brother who drove me to the hospital, is a brother from my dad.
Yeah.
So while he knows my sister, they don't have a lot of interaction.
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't really know much about multiple sclerosis, and none of my dad's side of the family did. And I had to admit, when I was at the neurologist's office, that I didn't know as much as I thought I did.
Right.
Because here I have, my sister Lori, who's been living with it for a few years, and I tried to be supportive of her, and I think she would tell you I was supportive, but this was a huge realization for me of how much I didn't know about it. But that being said, my mom, and my older sister, we had some experience with it. And Laurie was a huge help. She had a lot of information to provide and a huge guidance along the journey. She'd been living with it for about 8 years. Now that we talk about it, we think our maternal grandmother, my mother's mother, had it too.
Yes.
But we've just never diagnosed. We find ourselves saying things she was saying, and she always seemed to have this, invisible illness, and we always just thought she was old beyond her years.
Yeah.
And now we wonder about, if she had MS and wasn't diagnosed. And Laurie provided a funny moment, too, because shortly after receiving my diagnosis, I come home from work, and I have a message on my machine, and it's from somebody called MS Lifeline. And right away my head goes to the I've fallen and I can't get up people.
Yes.
So I call her, and I, lose it. That was, the breaking point for me. I'm like, are these the I fallen and I can't get up people? And how fast do they work? I'm on now some weird solicitation list. I won't have it. Man, I had one of those Lifeline bracelets. I will not have a Lifeline bracelet. And I hear her cracking up. And I'm like, why are you laughing? This isn't funny. She's like, those are the people who will send you the medication, you dummy. So half my family had experience and half didn't. So, yeah, I mean, it's, I wish I could take my sister's diagnosis away, but for me it helped having someone who could explain a lot of things for me and who already understood.
Yeah, it's true. It's two different dynamics going on there. As much as when we have people in our family, like my dad's cousin had MS, so I was aware of multiple sclerosis. But then when you get diagnosed yourself, it's a whole nother level you have to learn when you have to be your own care advocate instead of just supporting someone you love or know. It definitely is a different dynamic. And then you had both dynamics going on in your family because the other side, it was a whole new world for them.
Right,
they have all these big questions like, is this a death sentence? What's going to happen to you? Is everybody's the same? I just Googled something and it scared me. All that going on. And so that's definitely both sides of the coin for you on that.
Yeah.
Now, because, go ahead.
Well, and if we could talk about that, just to be a little unfunny for a second, I know your listeners have multiple sclerosis and are familiar with it, but one of the learning things for me was in seeing how, people in the community and my friends dealt with the diagnosis. I did not completely I realize now, I didn't completely understand what my sister was going through, but I took her word at face value. I knew my sister. I knew who she was before the diagnosis. So when she told me something about how she was feeling, I believed what she told me. And one of the sad things I've learned on this journey that I do make fun of in my work is people who just all of a sudden assume bad things about you because they don't understand what you're going through.
Right.
And it's sort of, that whole invisible illness stigma. And when it comes from your friends, and I'm very blessed, I had some wonderful, wonderful friends, but it was surprising and disheartening to me that even though I didn't completely understand what my sister was going through, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. And when people didn't do that to me, that was really heartbreaking.
So it really does hurt.
I'm trying to spread that message too. They say you don't get MS until you get MS. But, give people the benefit of the doubt. If you don't know what they're dealing with, believe what they're telling you. I don't tell my friends to go out and I don't expect them to research MS and get on the science, but, believe me when I tell you what's going on.
Right. And that's true. I see that so much in our online forums. It's not that someone without MS can actually understand. And, we see a lot of our peers going, I wish they would just understand what I'm going through. And like you said, they really can't fully understand unless they have it, but they can show empathy for what we're going through. And they could just understand
that our word is what we say. You know, if we tell you fatigue's different than being tired, it's different than being tired. And if we're saying that, okay, this is what the doctor says I have now, or this is the disease course they say I have now, and then it changes, it's not because we made something up or that wasn't real. It's because the doctors know more now. They have a bigger picture on what we're going through. And people
Exactly.
somehow equate that to people lying or making things up or wanting drama or attention. And it's no, if we could give all this away, I don't know very many people who wouldn't just go, okay, here, you can have it.
Right.
You can have
exactly. Like, I had one friend say to me, I wish
Mm-hmm.
you hadn't gotten your diagnosis because you didn't have any of these issues before you got your diagnosis.
Yeah.
And I'm like, actually, I did. Remember when we were talking about these things over a glass of wine and you guys just thought it was aging? Well,
Yeah.
you know what? It wasn't just aging. And now who's the wimp? Because I had something serious going on, not just aging. Thank you, you know.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's true, you know, and things like my mom was on our show a couple months ago, and she was talking because I've had MS and lupus since childhood, and before I had diagnosis, it was, you know, people thinking that she was doing something wrong, or why is Erica always at the doctor or hospital, or, you know, well, she's being a cheerleader one minute, she's laying on the couch the next. Is she lazy? Aren't you pushing her? And my mom got judged, even as a mother, because
Right.
people didn't
Wow.
understand the disease. So it is because it's an invisible illness, although sometimes very visible. People do, you know, question people and not take them at their face value. And they don't get that sometimes we can tell you there's something wrong with us and we're being tested, but we can't always give it a name or a type or a prognosis because the doctors themselves don't have a simple, easy test always in every case to go, okay, this is what you have. And I think that breeds a lot of that within our community, and it's really sad. It really is. So if we can just educate them on that much, that would be wonderful. You know, just to have empathy, support, understand, and just understand that this is a complex disease. So what we're telling you is what we know. That's all we can tell you. It really is.
Exactly.
So that's a very good point. Now, because of your cognitive issues, you say it was more cognitive at first than physical, and your familiarity with MS, was having a diagnosis actually kind of a relief for you? Like a lot of people say, it's kind of a relief in some way to know what it is.
It was, but for a different reason than I think most people say that, because I was very lucky in that I got my diagnosis very quickly. It was within 5 or 6 weeks.
Yes.
And I know that's not the norm. It took my sister Laurie over a year to get her diagnosis. So I was lucky with that. The relief for me came from the fact in learning that it wasn't Alzheimer's.
Yes.
Because as I said, that runs in my dad's side of the family, and that was a huge concern. So being told it was MS and knowing a little bit about it from my sister, it was like, okay, we can control this. It's not as horribly scary as Alzheimer's. I mean, it is and it isn't. I don't want to diminish either.
Right.
But I'm an independent person. I live alone. It's the fear that it was Alzheimer's was much more terrifying to me. So it was a relief in that regard.
Yeah.
But I was fortunate not to have the frustration so many people have of thinking they're crazy while they're running all these tests. My MS was so clear, it was almost like the lesions in my brain spelled out multiple sclerosis on the MRI scan.
MS.
So I was fortunate in that regard.
Yeah, it's true. I think the diagnosis process and when it's extended can be one of the most frustrating parts for some people, and them thinking that, well, if I get that diagnosis, I get that magic pill or shot or whatever that fixes it. So fix me, so this won't happen again. And unfortunately, even when you get that diagnosis, there's not that magic cure. You know, it's still a long journey and treatment and changing things up and figuring out what works for you. But I think that is the urgency sometimes we feel when we're going through the diagnosis processes. If we find out what it is, we can fix it. But that's not always the case. So I think that's the frustration that a lot of MSers have. You are a blogger and writer. Did you do that at all before your diagnosis?
No, I've been an avid reader my whole life,
Mm-hmm.
and for a while I had a fantasy of being a writer, and then I realized it was actually a lot of work and a lot of creativity, so I forgot about it. And then a few years before my diagnosis, a relative volunteered me to write something for a local publication,
Mm-hmm.
and I found out when that publication called me and asked me where this writing I was supposed to do was. So that was really my only experience with writing before. I've been an English major, but what happened after my diagnosis, a lot of people said you should be angry.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't angry, I was frustrated. And so I started in my head making fun of the frustrations.
Yeah.
And then I started just writing them just to get them out. And before you know it, I had a lot of these writings, and I thought they were pretty good. And work was getting tougher, so I was like, okay, I'll just become a famous writer. Well, of course, that's not that easy to do. And but I did start working and putting them together, and it led to the idea of a book, and which was great. And then when I had a lot done, like a year later, I had like a book worth of material that I was pretty psyched about, and I had the ability to meet an agent who said, "This is great, you have a book, but these days that's not enough." I was hoping she would help me get it published.
Right.
She said, "You need a platform," and I'm like, "What the heck's a platform?" And she said, "Well, start with a blog." And that was so intimidating to me. I didn't have the computer skills most people do. Computers didn't come to our high school. I'm in my late 40s now. Didn't come to our high school until just when I was about a junior or senior, and I just skipped them. And I took my old typewriter to college with me. I have a lot of computer experience.
I'm 47, so I know what you're saying.
And then the other idea was, well, what can I put in a blog? I have this material enough for a book, but what else can I write about? I've kind of I've used up that info, but fortunately or unfortunately, multiple sclerosis gives you a lot to work with.
It sure does.
So more crazy stuff. I guess I'd call it crazy. Not funny, but crazy.
Yeah.
Stuff happened, and I started writing more, and then I hooked up with a web guru who was awesome, and before I know it, the blog was born. And so the blog actually came first, and it's taken on a whole life of its own.
Yes. It's amazing.
After the blog was out for a while, I did get the book published, and it's called MS Madness, A Giggle More, Cry Less Story of Multiple Sclerosis. It's getting fabulous reviews.
Yes, I read those. They're amazing, actually.
What's interesting, though, is, the book is a one-time thing, where the blog has a life of its own because I'm still getting writings out to the community, and there's something new and fresh, and it's been an incredible experience. It's been great.
And one of the most exciting things you added back in April was the Giggles tab. And it's a page where we can share our own crazy stories and read some of the crazy stuff that happens to the other readers as well who follow the blog. So it's more interactive, and I think that's wonderful.
I love it, and I would really encourage your listeners to check it out because we all have a funny story. We do. We all have something that's just too bizarre to be believed, and because a lot of people who read my blog have other types of chronic illness. I've had so many people come up to me and say, "Oh, I don't have MS, but I have RA, and you just pretty much wrote my story." And so I open the Giggle page to anyone with any type of funny medical-related PG story. I'd love it if your listeners would check it out and add their own, and it doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to be a fancy writer. It doesn't even have to be grammatically correct. Just share your story because the one thing I've learned on this journey is giggles are good for you.
Yes.
There is now tons of medical information out there backing that up, and I don't think as a society we appreciate that. And so that is one of my goals. I'm not saying, when you're living with a chronic illness, especially MS, you're not allowed to have your breakdowns. You're not allowed to be sad. I have my breakdowns.
Right.
I have a lot of breakdowns. But what I am saying is when you can find a humor in the situation, that's a little bit of a positive release, and it helps.
I agree.
So, I think I have a way of looking at a frustrating experience and translating it so others can smile. But I know everyone else does too. So that's what the Giggle page is about, is hoping other people will, write in with their crazy stories. And some people have, and they've been great. They've been excellent.
I think that's amazing because not only do we get to share in your laughter and watch you go through your coping skills, but then we get to try it out ourselves and we get to get that feedback and get that to go, okay, we can laugh at this too. Yeah, it's still going to throw some curveballs our way, but we're going to, go through our little mourning period and get angry and all that. But in the end, we're going to find that silly humor in, I can't believe this is happening. So let's just find another way to get through this and keep going. So I think that's the beauty of that Giggle tab. Now, if you guys want to visit her blog, it's at YvonneDeSousa.com. So it's YvonneDeSousa.com. And not only will you be able to read more about her story, you will have the tab there that will tell you more about her book, and it is available now. So there's a buy tab there, and you can also find it on Amazon. We'll put all that information on our websites as well, so you'll have that information. We'll put that on our radio site and also on the MS&Me. So you can go to www.msandmemedia.com, and you can get more of the information and, of course, the click-throughs. You'll also have a YouTube channel if they want to watch some of your past videos as well. Do you find that that's also another level of sharing where you can really connect with people and get your story out there, plus throw in the humor?
A little bit. I have to admit, the video is new to me, so I'm not as, I don't know if they're as polished, but I'm working on that. And,
I think it's all just kind of a different layer of us.
I was invited to a conference where I had a chance to do a little stand-up. So that's one of the videos that's up there. And I'm exploring that aspect more.
And I see that in you. I can see kind of not just someone who's a speaker, a public speaker. I see you kind of doing that little stand-up comedian. I think it's awesome, actually. I really enjoyed it. So we'll put one of those on the website as well for everyone to enjoy. Now, when you decided to write your book and you also share your journey, I know you use the humor. The humor is such an important tool, but do you also find that your spirituality, your personal spirituality, has a great impact on your journey and coping as well?
I do. I am actually, I'm very religious, and I believe the sense of humor was like one of God's gifts to me, to help me on the journey. And so I do turn to that a lot. And that's a big aspect. And I wish everyone had that, but I know for some people they're not there yet, or you know, they're not ready. You know, maybe they don't feel that connection with a higher power that I do. But I do think the humor is a gift, and let's use it. And I do think that a higher power has a sense of humor too. So I think people think of that faith aspect a lot of times. Sometimes people think of it as stuffy and, you know, strict, and you're not supposed to smile, and that's just not the way it is. So I tried it both, and I really believe if I didn't have a sense of humor, I would have lost my sanity. So
I agree with you there.
The book details one time I was actually teaching Sunday school, and somebody approached me before my class and said something that really upset me. So I go stomping off, and I trip on my way to teach Sunday school in my church parking lot as Mass was starting. And when I trip, I didn't plan it at all. It's not something I do normally or say regularly, but the F word blasted out of my mouth in my church parking lot
one of
as
those
Mass
life
was
moments.
starting. So, of course, I was horrified. It was the first time I'd ever fallen with a mouse, so it was scary too. But after I gathered myself in the papers and said, okay, get your head back into teaching mode, I thought it was really funny. And that's where I mean that I think it was sort of like I'm not saying that God pushed me, but it was a little eye-opener, like to get over yourself.
He just lets us
so
see those moments.
So minor when you're on your way to teach my children. So I use them together a lot. So.
Yep. Now, our time's come to an end, but I definitely want everyone to go to our website, get those links, and that way you can get the buy link also on her blog to go to YvonneDeSousa.com so you can get the buy link to for her book, because I think it would really benefit all of us to find that coping mechanism, to use the humor to get through this journey with MS. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure, Yvonne.
Oh, thank you so much, Erica, and thank you for this show. This is awesome. I
Oh.
love it. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, guys, we'll see you again next week. Thank you for joining us.